Alrighty, welcome back to Weenie Trades, filming from my laptop. So hopefully you enjoy this little daily update on this fine Wednesday. So far the market, overall, I'm going to be covering the market, just a brief ETF overview, SPY, Qs, financials, semiconductors, and VIX. So let's get right into the video. Today, SPY had an inside day. What does that mean? Well, we're inside yesterday's range. Today we were gapping up and we had sold off kind of on the intraday. If we look at just range bound, we can see our highs are at 437. We can see that our lows are at 434. If you were watching the Weenie Trades live stream, I was saying, hey, I would be very surprised if SPY was over $340 today. Well, there you go. Didn't really get much past the upper even 430s. So it's very interesting to see what SPY is up to later on into the week. If we look at the daily time frame, we're still looking at that 425 level, 425.60. That's the most recent flat top resistance. That should be a little bit of support, at least on the intra week. But later in the week, I do think that we could go maybe as low as something like 414, 416 on a deeper sell-off. I don't expect the SPY to get much deep underneath, 400, maybe even as low as 390s, but I don't see SPY 360, 340, just a slight bearish lean on the SPY. However, what could happen as well is just consolidation. So over the next coming weeks, a bit of a bearish tilt, but short term, we could just chop shop and zigzag. So we could just, chop up, flop up, maybe go as high as 440. I don't see us going too much higher than 440 based off this chart formation, unless, of course, bulls think that this is a higher low and they can take the SPY up towards new highs. Otherwise, short term, choppy, but medium term, a little bit more bearish on the SPY. Next up, we've got the Qs, and the QQQ ETF is now starting to show some relative weakness. Before it was showing relative strength, breaking out, hitting new all-time highs, but lately we've sold off a decent amount from the highs, 6%. So the Qs now starting to show a little bit of relative weakness, and that might have to do with the interest rates and the banks starting to take over. But the Qs, again, similar to the SPY, a little bit more relative weakness. I'm going to be watching the Qs at this 340 level, and that coincides with this prior pivot top. If we're coming off and selling off into that support level, there's likely going to be a short-term little bounce. Sure, you could short it along the way, but really the short entry was at the kickback rally into prior resistance. So the Qs, let's quickly check out Facebook. Facebook looks a little bit more bearish. Facebook's been relatively weak in terms of the Qs, so look for Facebook to probably over the next coming weeks under months get down into the lower 300s. Netflix has been performing very well and has had a lot of relative strength. And it's probably because they've got good subscriber growth, Netflix getting upgraded. I use Netflix. It's a great platform. They have great Netflix originals. And if we actually look at the intraday time frame, I was saying in the pre-market, if you watched at Weenie Trades live, we did this live. Not many people live stream for free and show and offer free trade setups. But I said Netflix over 590 looks to be a good long setup. And I played it over 598, 598. And that's because I couldn't get filled. I tried to get filled, hit the limit, hit the limit, hit the limit, couldn't hit the limit. And eventually I had to really bid up, and I got filled right at about 598. Boom, we get a nice good push, take off some profits in the lower 600s. And then lastly, my last out was about 605. So Netflix, very good day trade today. And as you can see, just kind of fluttered around the rest of the day, while the SPY was a little bit more range bound and wide and choppy. So Netflix looking for relative strength in the future. However, if the overall market is selling off, Netflix is selling off. Similarly, Tesla was a good trade this morning. Beautiful little pennant pattern. And Tesla, do you see this? It's an equilibrium. We have our high, low, lower high, higher low, bull break. And that's right where I entered on Tesla, just over 783, and stop loss just beneath the consolidation. Boom, take profits. We extend through. And then as we started to come on in, I went ahead and took a little bit of a less profits on the second half. So Tesla, still expecting a little bit more sideways consolidation. We talked about that iron condor yesterday, selling a bear call credit spread, but selling a bull put credit spread at the same time. Tesla, still range bound, but relative strength, similarly to Netflix. So if the market's green, Tesla's going to be bigger green. If the market is red, Tesla's going to be just a little bit, just slightly red, in my personal opinion. Of course, anything can happen, but that's the way I see it. Still watching Tesla in the lower 760s, maybe even lower 750s if I can get that dip buy. That may be wishful thinking, but we'll see what type of opportunities arise at Weenie Trades Live. So that's Tesla. Let's check out Apple over here. Apple, just a consolidation day. Looks similar to the SPY, but Apple kind of creeping on the door. Apple looks like a short setup underneath 142. So Apple, yeah, one of the weaker tech names. It's just a slower mover. So a dollar or two is a big move for Apple. So if you can capture that, it's a good trade. Otherwise, Apple, 145 is still resistance. And even if we get above it, there's more resistance at 146.50. 147. So Apple's got a lot of work to do to hold up the market. You know, if we check out Amazon real briefly, Amazon bearish. Amazon probably dealing with some supply issues, and Amazon could come down just a little bit lower. The mid 3200s might be in store if the overall market is breaking down. And then also lastly, Google. Google even is my wild child. Google's, it's ironic because Google's not a wild child. Tesla's the one that's a wild child. And over here on Google, we just broke that support. I said I like that dip buy at 27.70. Boom, you're going to get a little bounce, but now we're selling off. Google, I'm looking to see if there's support at the gap at 25.72, and that would be about $100 lower. So we'll see how that support might react. Otherwise, my final dip buy in this, buy with 3 hands on Google is 24.24. So next up, we got the XLF, and the XLF, opposite of the Qs kind of, is in relative strength, just going through a consolidation day. The XLF is a big weighting in the SPY, and it's probably what stopped the SPY from absolutely collapsing today. But if we check the QQQ, the Qs were down today, so the Qs a little bit underperforming. Very interesting because long term, I like the Qs, but medium term, it looks like it wants to be rotated out of. Next up, we've got the semiconductors, the SMH. And the SMH, you know, we're still in this channel right over here. So we got higher lows, we've got higher highs. Somebody was asking me, should I buy the SMH up here? I was like, well, you're buying near trending resistance. And look how that worked out. Boom, moved to the downside. So short term, the SMH, there might be a little bit of support at about 253, and that just coincides with the trend line. And it would actually be a higher low to the previous low. But otherwise, the SMH, the semiconductor ETF, I like the dip buy down there at about 240. So 240 on the SMH. Briefly, I want to touch on Micron. Micron earnings, just a bit of a doji day, still down 2%, but inside the expected move. I said I'd like a Micron short at about 73. Boom, to the penny. My number is 73.30. 73.30 is resistance, 73 is resistance twice, sell off. In the morning, I actually took a short trade at the breakdown of 71. Got a small partial in the low 70s. But then stopped out on the last piece just for, I think it was like, what, $6? Much smaller than the Tesla and Netflix trade, but still, we got a little bolster to the green day. We got AMD. AMD selling off on the daily time frame. This is hurting the semiconductors. Big fake out. We're talking about 109 resistance and just gap down and go along with the overall market. So short term AMD support 96 and then maybe as low as 91.39. So I have alerts at those levels. Be sure to be tuned in to Weenie Trades Live if you want to see how I react at those levels when I get that ding. Ask me, hey, what do you think of AMD right here? Next up we've got is Nvidia. And Nvidia, similar thing, starting to break trending support. Do you see this? So we got our low, we got our higher low, we got a higher low. We talked about this bounce. It was a higher low pivot, and it coincided with the previous breakout area right here. See that? Right there. Leads to a good bounce, but look, we're saying lots of resistance. And that one day where Nvidia was upgraded, we had a beautiful consolidation and failed to break out. That usually can signal a top. And so far, Nvidia has topped out and is rolling over. Short term to medium term over the next few weeks and months, I'm slightly bearish on Nvidia. But long term, I love Nvidia. Pays a good dividend, good stock, good company. But short term needs to correct just a little bit. And lastly, we've got the VIX, the Volatility and Fear Index. And if you watched yesterday's video, the VIX, we're saying, hey, here we got an equilibrium. We have our high. We found a low. We found our lower high at that 25. And did you hear last video? I said I'm looking for a potential higher low in the lower 20s. Well, we got just that. We got the higher low in the lower 20s, 2150, somewhere around there. So now the VIX, this is going to be telling of the future. So the VIX right here, there's a breakout on the VIX over 23.79, and that's breaking this inside bar bullish. Usually that can lead to a continuation. If the VIX breaks out, the market can have a bigger, deeper, more volatile sell-off. Doesn't have to. The VIX isn't always correlated with the market, but just think, hey, fear is high, volatility is high. We can get going on the downside. So keep an eye out for volume on the SPY and where the VIX is at. Conversely, if the VIX is breaking down, the VIX might break down underneath 2150, and that would mean that volatility is sucking out of the market. Now, here's the thing. Even if the VIX breaks down, it doesn't mean that the market is necessarily going to rip higher or go higher. It could just mean that the SPY is just going to consolidate and chop around. So that's something to think about. So on the breakdown of the VIX, expect SPY chop and consolidation, lower volatility. If the VIX breaks out, think high fear, high ranges, big ranges, and the SPY could dump and break to those lower support levels. So if the VIX is somewhere in the mid 35s, that would coincide with maybe something like a SPY 414. Again, it's good to be prepared for these scenarios, but just understand that most of the time the market does its little chop shop grind. It goes through mini corrections, mini bounces, and continues on up. But there's a lot of shenanigans happening. That's why I want to warn you and be aware of where the VIX might be breaking out. And we'll obviously be reevaluating at Weenie Trades Live. Alrighty, thanks for tuning in. See you tomorrow.